Running the biggest school district in the area during a pandemic has had its challenges. Joining us today on Newsmakers is Dr. Melinda Moss, Superintendent of Joplin Schools. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's first start with, how are you doing? I mean, are you able to take care of yourself during all of this?
Oh yes, I'm doing well. You know, it is a challenging job, but it's one that I enjoy. And I am blessed to have a lot of really good people alongside me that work hard every day. And when you enjoy and look forward to the people you're going to see when you get up in the morning, it makes coming to work much more pleasurable. And so I'm blessed to be here in Joplin.
I'm glad. One of our staff was asking, I wonder how she's doing. How's she, handling? Because I know it's got to be difficult.
Well, it's difficult, but we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about how we're better together.
For sure.
And so just having a good team and good people and getting to see students every day has been a real blessing this year.
I bet.
I'm thankful we're back in school.
Yeah. So how are things going with respect to student attendance, absenteeism because of the pandemic? How's that going?
It's going pretty well. I mean, I think that we have seen some increases in absenteeism simply because of COVID and quarantines and other challenges, but not this year like last year.
Oh.
And so, if anything, what last year has taught us is the importance of attendance and the importance of in-person learning. Our students do better when they're with us daily, and that's what we want.
And are some kids or families, are they still doing the online learning?
Yes. Well, Joplin's fortunate in that we can offer that as an alternative to our families, and for some students, it works very well. And so we have our own virtual school, and right now in that school we have about 500 students. They are spread out pretty evenly across our kindergarten through 12th grade. You would think there might be a better concentration at the high school level, but that's really not what we have found. We found that it's pretty even across all grade levels.
And do you see that continuing, or will it end at some point?
I do see it continuing because I think for some families it works. It's also a good alternative for families that might have migrated otherwise to a homeschool situation because it kind of offers maybe the best of both worlds. If they're choosing that route, Joplin Schools is here to serve them with our online platforms.
And does that cost very much money, or is there an added expense with online learning?
It does cost money. The district absorbs that, but we also get state aid then on the students that we are able to count as our own in that program. So we have teachers that are solely dedicated to the virtual school. We have our online platforms that we pay license fees for. But then again, we're also then not providing as much overhead cost in terms of busing and utilities and things such as that. So it works out well for us.
It kind of equals out.
Yes.
And are there, address or where they can live to take the online schooling? Is it the same as if?
Yes, they need to be residents within our district boundaries.
Because that would seem like it could lend to expansion, even if there's a kid who lives in Webb City or Carl Junction or something who wants to go to Joplin Schools, if they would allow that.
Yes, and it would still have to be like it is with other out-of-district students, tuition paying options, things such as that. But for the most part, far and away, they need to be residents of the Joplin School District. And then there are other options for virtual learning if they are outside of Joplin Schools, just not as our own students.
Gotcha. And do you think kids learn better or worse, or is it about the same with the online education?
I think in general, students learn better when they have an in-person instructor and a teacher right there actively proctoring their work and able to respond quickly to questions and also to adjust the curriculum if they're struggling. So for most students, they learn better in person, but there is a handful that can thrive and do well in the virtual world.
And did you have a playbook of any sort that would lend itself to something of this magnitude?
Well, we started our virtual school actually the year before COVID was ever even discussed. We didn't know that was on the way. But if you look at the trend in education over the last even 10 years, it was a train that was starting to leave the station
Right.
in terms of offering that as an option to our families. So we had started that school the year prior and had about 154 students in that in our first year of offering. And then, of course, that exploded to about 1,500 students in the last school year of parents that wanted to send their kids virtually and still be Joplin School District
Right.
students. So thankfully, we already had the infrastructure in place, and then there was much scrambling to make sure that we had enough licenses, that students had devices, and I can't say enough
right.
about Shelley Tarter and her team who run the virtual program, because their attitudes were can do, get it done, whatever it takes. Our technology department was right behind them with what they needed, and everybody really pulled together as that exploded.
Right.
And then this year now we're down to about 500, and we'll see where next year takes us. But I think it's a good alternative rather than to have to go to outside vendors for our Joplin schools.
And it kind of sounds like that's just sort of the teacher motto, the mindset of just helping kids no matter what. Because teachers do that all of the time, not just during pandemics.
This is true. And I think the pandemic has illustrated the importance of the teacher. And there's nothing we can do more effective than putting the best teacher that we can in front of our students.
And I've always said teachers and some police officers, and they need to be paid like, football players or big pro athletes, because what they do, it just can't be quantified to
Correct.
some degree. Dealing with children, and I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I know.
Well, I'm a parent and grandparent as well, and we are getting everyone's most precious resource. And I'm always amazed at the trust that our parents and community members put in us each day, and we strive to deserve that.
And you do a great job too,
Thank
I must
you.
say. So talk about the district's safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of service plan, SRCSP for short.
Yes.
It's on your website,
Yes.
and it's been updated several times.
Yes.
What's changed?
Well, from last year to this year, I would say what has changed is we are no longer offering the hybrid option at the high school. So all of our students are in person every day at the high school. We've also changed our masking protocols to masking being fully voluntary, except for on school transportation, because the CDC issued an order, and then we were found to be part of that order with public transportation with our school buses. And so one of the changes that we moved to was requiring masks for anyone on our school transportation. CDC orders are different from CDC recommendations in that an order does carry the full force of law. They're used rarely. And were we not to mask on our buses, then we would have a problem with perhaps future funding and some other compliance issues. So we are masking on the buses. But once they get to school, masking is voluntary. The other thing that has changed for Joplin schools is our quarantines. So while a student may be a direct contact, as defined by the CDC in terms of how close you were and for how many minutes to someone that had an active case of COVID, they can return to school immediately if they are fully masked.
Okay.
So that is a change that the school district has worked through.
So quarantine doesn't necessarily mean, if you're identified in the past, it was you have to stay at home for
Right.
10 to 14 days, whatever that is.
Yes.
But that's not what that means now.
Not for the Joplin schools.
Okay.
Now, our own health department has their rules, and so apart from school, then our community would have to follow what our health department is saying. And so it doesn't mean that they don't have to isolate at all.
Sure.
But during school, they can be there.
Okay. They just have to have the mask.
Yes.
Okay. And how tough is it to continually clean up? Part of what I read is that, the extra cleaning procedures. It's tough enough to have to clean up after thousands or hundreds of kids at a time.
Yes.
How is it to clean up constantly like
Well,
that.
I always say our custodial staff are our heroes, and they wade into messes that none of us would dare touch.
For sure.
And I'm so thankful because they do it with such a great attitude. It is hard. It was hard even before
Oh, yeah.
COVID was an issue. We are disinfecting more, and I can say that I see them when I'm in the buildings daily throughout the day. They are wiping down high-touch areas. We're paying great attention to, say, stairwell rails or doorknobs, any high-touch area frequently and throughout the day. And then we have an EPA disinfectant spray that they're spraying half of the building nightly.
Okay.
So one half will get it on a Monday night, the other half on a Tuesday night, back to the Wednesday night. So that spray disinfectant is going throughout the building. And what we saw last year is not only did it help us keep our COVID numbers under control, but it also helped us with things like strep throat and flu. And we saw a great decrease in those things too. So
Yeah, because they're all communicable diseases, and
Yes.
it's just some are.
and those are still with us.
Yeah, of
we
course.
forget about that, but our custodians are doing a marvelous job, and their attitude couldn't be better. And they realize they're part of the Army, keeping our
Right.
kids safe.
For sure.
And I think it's elevated our view of how important they are.
Yes, the necessary workers, the
Yes.
ones that, and talking about that, labor shortage. Nationwide, there's a labor shortage, and bus drivers in particular.
Yes.
How's Joplin Schools doing?
Well, we need bus drivers. We've had to double up a lot of routes. Our transportation director, our assistant director, anybody that can has been driving a bus. And we are recruiting actively. And if you go to our joplinschools.org website, you can apply there. And I encourage everybody to do that. We've also been looking closely at ways that we can incentivize our drivers in recruitment efforts. And there's actually some proposals that will be going to our school board at our regular September meeting to address just that and try to help us get more drivers in the pool because it is a challenge. It was a challenge before COVID, and it has only gotten worse. So other than our bus drivers, another area that we're kind of struggling with is our behavior support teachers, aides. We call them paraprofessionals.
Right.
We always need some of those, and that's a very challenging job. But we've also looked at ways of incentivizing that work and just looking at our recruitment and retainment, even of our classroom teachers. And we are still fully staffed in that area, but what we're finding is the applicant pools are shrinking, so maybe not as many are applying for those positions. And
I read a story yesterday about Philadelphia School District, and they are paying parents something like $300 a month so that they opt out of the public transportation and do it themselves, and then they get paid to take their kids back and forth to school.
yes, that would be incredible if we had to do something like that. I don't think we're anywhere near that
Sure.
at this point, but I have every empathy for districts that are struggling with that right now.
And you said that there used to be farmers. Farmers
Oh,
would
yes.
be bus drivers. Talk about that.
Well, I think it's a job that lends itself to certain occupations or maybe even retirement age individuals that still want to be doing something and be active and get up in the morning and drive your route. And what I've seen throughout my career, particularly in rural districts, is a lot of times bus driving would be a job that would attract someone that was in agriculture.
Oh.
And let's say they would get up in the morning, run their route, could go back, work their farm during the day, come back, run their route in the afternoon. And you used to see a lot more than that than you do now.
Yeah, and I never even thought of that. Have you seen an increase in students dealing with anxiety issues?
Not so much. There were societal and social, emotional, physical issues that were with us prior to COVID.
Sure.
So at this time, we've anticipated that, and we have hired more school-based mental health type positions this year. We've used a lot of our stimulus and economic recovery funds in order to do that. So social workers have become very important to us as we're going out and looking for students that we may have lost over the past year. And so those issues were with us. They're still with us, and we're trying to address those with more staff. And thankfully, what's allowed us to do that has been some of the economic recovery funds.
That's great. Yeah, because there were 2 students that just recently died, elementary school students, and you had counselors available at that time.
We did. That was a very tragic car accident that happened over the weekend, and we actually just posted those obituaries on our Facebook page today, and not only for their students, but the families, and particularly faculty and staff. We worked over the weekend looking at ways that we could support them when school started on Monday, and I'm so thankful the way our counselors come together. We have counselors that are specially trained in crisis, and there's just such an outpouring when that happens, and I can't say enough about how that school worked to make it the best. And when I was in the building Tuesday and walking the building with the principal, I saw students back to work. They were engaged, they were learning. Our kids were needing that structure.
Right.
And they're grieving, but they're doing well.
And kids are resilient. They seem to bounce back probably much quicker than even adults do these days.
Probably so, but we still need to attend to their little hearts.
Of course. And so we were talking about the COVID numbers and how the district kind of goes along with the community, and you haven't seen a whole lot this year so far.
No, I really was a bit pessimistic about what we might see after the first 3 weeks of school. And so those first couple of days of school, I really felt like that was a baseline number. And we did have some that were active cases of COVID within our faculty and staff. And then that first week, we saw that uptick, but it wasn't drastic at all. And then it's leveled out. And now we're kind of waning. I think September 7th or so was our highest day. And now it's going down. And today I checked before I came here because I anticipated that question. We had 2 faculty members that were active COVID and just 12 students. And that's district-wide out of about 7,700 kids, 12. And that's actually a little less than we had this time last year. So going to voluntary masking and a bit more crowded in the classrooms, particularly at the high school level and all of that, we were very fearful that those numbers would explode. And we know that 5 minutes from now we could get different news.
Right, knock on wood.
And we're watching it daily, and I want our community to know that we are not taking it lightly, and we're watching it, monitoring it as much as possible, and have great communication with our health department. But we're doing really well. And I looked at the hospitalizations in our county and city numbers this morning, and they're also going down. Right. So, the schools are a reflection of what's going on in your community. And so to see our numbers going down some too is just a wonderful encouragement.
Yeah.
And we know it's tenuous, but it gives us hope.
Sure.
And as I
maybe
said,
take a breath. You're able to just kind of like breathe for a minute.
I think that was so all-consuming.
Yeah.
And now I see great work looking if COVID wasn't an issue, what else do we need to be paying attention to?
Right.
So looking at getting back on track with how we're sequencing our curriculum and what are instructional activities, and starting to have those deep conversations again about student learning.
Sure.
And focusing on really what matters and the reason why we exist.
Right.
Has been refreshing. And as I said, I think our performance last year really illustrated how important in-person learning and attendance is. And the longer that we can maintain that, the better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And do you know about vaccinations? Like how many in your district, employee-wide, are they vaccinated? Do you get those numbers?
I can only estimate. We did provide an incentive program for our employees for vaccinations. And, it wasn't a lot, but we were paying each employee $25 if they could show us that they were fully vaccinated, and an opportunity for everyone to sign up for that. We're actually going to do our drawing for our incentive prizes this Friday.
Oh.
So there is that too. We had 4 cash prizes over and above the universal bit, and we were hoping that would give us an idea of kind of where we were, and even if it just moved a handful of people over to getting vaccinated, that would help us with quarantines and isolations and whatnot. And it looks to me like, if I just base it on the number that we have in the pool right now, because the deadline has passed, we're about 62 to 63% vaccinated.
Yeah.
And when I look at Joplin City data, it looks like we're tracking along pretty well with that, because we're higher within the city limits, it seems, from some of the dashboards that I see, as opposed to county and outlying areas. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. Well, and do you think that it will ever be required like they do with MMR and DTaP and chickenpox vaccines? Do you think this will ever, like,
I don't know,
a box on the list?
I don't know. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball for that. There has been a lot of polarizing opinions, I think, on vaccination with this one more than others. A little bit of hesitancy in how it was rolled out and how quickly it came about. I know there was a lot of research behind the vaccine,
like
and there's
20,
been
30
things
years,
going on prior to this. It was just accelerated because a lot of those steps that usually are sequential happened in parallel, which moved it along. But it's a little different, and I would dare say what the future might hold for that. That's beyond my scope. But as for Joplin schools, I have had questions, particularly with President Biden's recommendations that came out a week or so ago.
200 or more employees.
I have had some people ask. I don't see us mandating that anytime soon. I do think there's been some communication out of the governor's office that is a little bit of pushback on that as well. So I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, and we don't need to get into anything
for
political.
The near future, for the near future, I don't see that happening.
Well, so moving away from COVID, like you said, that getting back to things that matter, you guys have to deal with things like suicide prevention and teen pregnancy and focusing on those. How are things going?
Well, we've always had certain elements of that in our curriculum and our transitions program at the high school and whatnot, and we've continued to do that and will continue. And that data, again, is pretty much reflective of what's going on in the greater community. But those problems didn't go away with the pandemic.
Yeah, I would think sometimes they get magnified, So what about, I guess, graduation rates? They weren't super great last year, still a little bit lower than Webb City and Carl Junction.
Yes,
do you know what contributes to that?
And we're still lower. We have a pretty mobile population. We've even looked at our own policies and procedures and asked, well, what are barriers to that? And just in how we're handling with students that might be migrating to homeschool or having enough staff to seek out students when they kind of drop off the radar. Where are they? We added a position to our high school administrative team this year, and I know that she is working directly. That is her job, is to go after students that might be at risk with credit recovery or, hey, you've been absent the last 10 days, where are you? And just really trying to address those at risk, and then find them when they may move away and we don't know what happened to them, so they have to become a drop. When really, if we had faculty and staff more devoted to that, we might be able to track those down, and they weren't. Maybe they migrated to homeschool or another option. So, and then just general provision of instruction and remediation. So we're tackling that in a great way. But it kind of goes hand in hand with your poverty rates and other at-risk factors. But that can never be an excuse for us. we're still hammering away at it. But
It's really important too.
yes, but COVID did us no favors
I can't
in that category.
Yeah. So talk about the school construction. There's
Sure.
the new elementary school being built on North Main.
Right.
Where are we in that process?
Well, we're moving right along. We did run into some rock, and that was as we got the building pad was done without nary an issue. It was best case scenario. As we moved around with our parent pickup driveway and the roadway going up the hill, then all of a sudden we did find the rock. And so I'm so thankful to the way our site construction person as well as Crossland and all worked through that. Where they actually brought a rock crusher on site. And so we've been able to use the rock that we've blasted, and we have finished blasting. This week was our last blast, and now they're using that crushed rock that we would have had to have shipped in
Right.
to work on maybe our parent entrances, our parking lot, a lot of that initial laydown is now being done. So we're still looking at a December 22 completion date.
So about a year.
Yes,
That's great.
and should be starting to address footings at the end of this week or first of next week.
That's
So
exciting.
it is exciting, and it's a hopeful thing, even the process of shutdown and everything else, that you're still building something. And it's going to be such a nice presence there as people enter our town from the north, and it's going to make a statement as to the priority our community puts on education.
And what are they going to do with the old school buildings?
Well,
West Central.
yes, West Central and Columbia. Columbia, as you know from all of our campaign, is the building that has so many geotechnical issues underneath,
Right.
as well as cracks and problems within the building. We continue to monitor that every day, and we have then professional engineers and whatnot that come and look at it monthly, and those readings go out for analysis. The movement was pretty dramatic up until about the last year, and then it's kind of stopped. But we're still looking at it every day. It's not a building that we feel like we can remediate. So when students do leave Columbia to move out to Dover Hill, we do plan to raise that building.
Right.
But it's still a nice 2.5 acre site that we think could be an enhancement to that community. And there are community groups looking at that as to how maybe they could even take that over to turn it into a park-like setting. So we want it to be an enhancement for that community. Now West Central, while it is also a building over 100 years old, and it's right butted up next to 7th Street, it may not be an ideal location anymore for an elementary school, but it's a solid building.
Sure.
And that safe room that is attached to West Central is still an asset for our community, the FEMA safe rooms that were built around 2013-14. So we hope to keep that one open, and if we can't find an alternative school use for it, then perhaps there would be an interested buyer, community organization, some other way to appreciate that building. But we do not plan to tear that one down if we can keep it in service.
Well, like I said, it's a big job, and we're really glad that you took time to come and talk to us about everything Joplin Schools.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Dr. Melinda Moss, Superintendent of Joplin Schools, for joining us today. This is Newsmakers on KGCS TV from the Ruth Copeland Studios here at Missouri Southern State University, and I'm Bobby Pottruff. We'll see you again soon.